Caribbean voices are heard in global conversations. So enough about our distinguished guests. Let's talk a bit as to why we are all here. Whether you here are a computer science student, whether you're a policy student, whether you're a tech professional, whether you're just a regular end user curious about how to make a bigger impact, this webinar is for you. The beauty of the IETF is that it doesn't care whether you went to university or which company you work for, whether you wear flip-flops or suits. What matters here is your ability to contribute good ideas and help implement them. So as we dive into this afternoon's discussion, I encourage you to think big, ask questions, challenge assumptions, and remember, somewhere out there, there's a problem that your unique Caribbean perspective can solve. The internet needs what you have to offer. It might not just know that right yet, but it needs you. So thanks for joining us this afternoon, and let's discover together how we can help build the internet of tomorrow, one RFC at a time. Without further ado, I would like to turn this session over to our distinguished speakers, Suresh and Krishnan. So the floor is over to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kevin. That was like an awesome intro. Hard to beat that, so thank you. So I have some slides to kind of walk us through it. I don't want to go through all the slides, but it's mainly for like guiding discussions. So just switching back to it. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so Kevin already went through this, but one thing I wanted to point out is like my first IETF meeting was IETF 49 in San Diego. So it's going to be about 25 years. So when I started in the IETF, I had like no idea what I was getting into. So I met all the people who are my heroes and like people who have done all the cool stuff. And they were like so nice and kind to me that I kept coming back. So I think that is like the first thing I wanted to talk about. Like people are like very friendly. And as Kevin said, people are willing to take input because everybody has a unique perspective to bring in there. Because like in a lot of when I first went to the IETF, most of the IETF was like people from the US and like Western European countries, right? And it has changed quite a bit. And I'll show you some of the stuff before, but that's something that has certainly changed over the 25 years I've been involved in the IETF. So building on what Kevin said, the mission of the IETF, so again, everything we do is documented in RFCs that have the consensus of the community. This is the mission statement of the IETF. Our goal is to make the internet work better by producing high quality, relevant technical documents. Okay, so we don't really like do stuff that we force people to do. So everything that we've done has been adopted by people because it was the best way to do things possible, right? So when Kevin talked about like, protocols for sending WhatsApp or like for banking and everything, it's because we just produce the best technical standards that are possible and how the networks are managed. So if you look at BGP, which is the protocol for how the internet networks communicate to each other, that came from the IETF too. So like what we do is really voluntary standards. So our standards gets adopted by people, not because a government told them to do, not because the boss told them to do, but simply because they are the best standards that make things work. And the ethos of the IETF is like, the basic principles by which we work is like everyone may participate. And this has kind of gotten like bigger and bigger over the years. And I'll talk a little bit about the COVID pandemic. So the IETF always had remote participation for people, but it has like slowly improved in quality, how it has happened. So we started off 25 years ago, all you had was like an MP3 stream that you can listen to. When you could like, hear all the people in all the rooms, and like every room had a stream of audio that was going out and you could all listen. So, and right now, everything we do now on a room, we also do remotely. So we get like people to talk remotely. We have like speakers who are remote. We have working group chairs who are remote in a meeting. So every meeting we do is a fully hybrid meeting. Like, so if you've been to other places which have meetings like that, most of the time, unless like everybody's remote, the participant for remotes is pretty bad. But now with IETF, like all the remote people have as much input into everything and as much participation in everything as somebody who's in a room. all the work that IETF does is available for free. So all our work is like internet drafts and RFCs. They're all available for free for anybody. So which is different from, let's say, the ISO standards or like other standards, IEEE standards. They all cost money for people to buy and use, but the IETF standards are all free. And the contributions are judged purely on technical merits. And we determine our success by voluntary deployment, like I said. So because like unless we do good protocols, nobody would use them. So there's no force of the government or the UN or anything behind what we do. It's just that people like our protocols, they deploy them. This is a busy slide. This is something I want you to take a look at after, not during, because I'm not going to go through all these pieces. But if you look at it, pretty much everything that builds the internet today. So if you look at like TLS, which is the security stuff, like when you see HTTPS, that's getting used. BGP is like how all the countries and the networks that like are inside countries and companies, they all connect to each other. QUIC is a protocol which makes sure that your packets are like reliably and dynamically transmitted all the time. So, and when you talk about video, right, like, you know, when Kevin was talking about like Netflix not buffering. So a lot of the work for the codecs for doing it and for retransmissions and like how you buffer, that's all being done in the IETF. And IPv6 was like a major thing that I've been working on for like almost 27 years now. It's really about how do we make sure the internet is open to the world, because with the addresses we had in before, there is not enough addresses for the whole world to have. So like there's like IPv6 opened it up, the internet to everybody, to be very frank. That's how I feel about it. And like if you think about like the Internet of Things, all those things are like made possible by V6. I just want to talk a little bit about the community that we have. So if you look at it, like, you know, this number would have been very different like 25 years ago. Like most of the stuff would have come from North America, like very little from Europe and pretty much nobody from anywhere else. So this is from like last year. So you see like barely 40% of the stuff comes from North America. The Latin America is like pretty small, but it's like significantly growing. So Krishnan can talk a little bit more about it, but we have had like slowly increasing participation from the LACNIC, like Latin American, Caribbean countries going forward. And we even had policymakers coming from Caribbean countries who participate in the IETF, like which is the government officials and stuff and so on, who've been to the IETF and they see how the IETF works. And so this is like something that has changed. And you do see on the left, you see like the sector-wise, there's like quite a bit of like, you know, vendors and stuff like that, but you also see like civil society, academia, and government starting to participate. Gender-wise, we are not doing an exactly good job. It's like I would think it's like a pretty poor situation right now, but it's something that is like constantly improving. So we're getting like more and more women and like, you know, like gender non-binary people coming to the IETF. I think this number is like slowly increasing. And we started off with a low number, but we're like increasing this quite a bit to have like more wider participation from people. And when Kevin was talking about rough consensus, so we believe in rough consensus and running code. So which means that we are trying to not achieve the most ideal thing possible in taking the most amount of time, but we're actually trying to get something that works pretty well and doesn't have major technical flaws in it, right? That's what we're trying to do. And one of the things we have done in the recent, like I would say like probably 10 plus years is this thing called a hackathon. So before the IETF, we sit down and get people to work on the protocols that we define. So people can, like, if you look at it, this is like one example of a room that was sitting there. But like the last hackathon we had in Madrid, like about a week ago, was like 2 big rooms like this, right? Like filled with people. And they all sit down and code on our protocols. And again, it's got the same mix of students, like academia, like and vendors and operators, everybody sitting there and doing stuff. And there's also like a whole bunch of people who are remote in this who participate. So we kind of test our output to make sure it's implementable and usable and find issues and feed it back into the process. And another thing I wanted to point out is like, if you look at it, you see like a significant percentage of the people who attend an IETF meeting are remote. So this has changed quite a bit since COVID. You see like sometimes like even half, right? Like when we had a meeting in Australia, like half the people were remote, right? And they were like actually participating very, very productively in the meetings. So you do see like about 40% of our meetings are people who attend remotely. And one important thing I wanted to say is like, you know, if you want to participate and you want to be remote, and you cannot afford the meeting fees, there is a meeting fee for remote participation. But if you cannot afford it, you can ask for a waiver, and it's a no questions asked fee waiver. So if you just say like, I'm not able to pay, you just check something, and then you get a free registration to the IETF remotely. So that's something we've had like over the past few years. This is a working group I chaired called SMOO, where we worked on this fee waiver document, and now this is like an official IETF policy that anybody can ask for a remote fee waiver, no questions asked. And your information of asking for the waiver will not be published. So nobody actually knows who paid the meeting fee and who didn't pay a meeting fee. So that's completely kept confidential. So how do you engage in the IETF? All the working groups are open to anyone and free to join. All the inputs and outputs are available to anybody, and most of the work is conducted online. So even if you have a meeting staff, we have 3 meetings every year, like one in North America, one in Europe, and one in Asia. And we also had a meeting in South America once. We had like a meeting in Buenos Aires. It was like an exploratory meeting, but we can actually change our scheduling to like get a Caribbean location or a South American location if things work out. And same for Africa too, right? Like we're actually trying to see how we can get into like locations where we can get like more new participants as well. And full remote participation is available for all the meetings. And the open source hackathons are also co-located with all the plenary meetings. That's 3 times a year. So this is the URL here. You can go and start looking at how you can participate in the meetings. And for starting new work, the idea is really to bring the work to the IETF and try to have the problem scoped and well-defined and understood, and make sure that you find other people who are willing to work on it. So that's like a high-level way of getting new work started off. So this is like a BOF process. I think like Krishnan can explain a little bit more onto this, or he can actually get back to me and we can talk further on how to bring new work. And one key thing I wanted to say is like the openness of the IETF is the basis for innovation, and it's the key to its success. Like if you're not open to everybody, we will not succeed. And all the standards are available to anyone online at no charge. Like you can just go to Google or your favorite search engine, look for the RFCs, you can find them. And we get input from pretty much everybody who's involved everywhere in the world. And that allows us to interoperate across like a transcontinental network and a network of networks, exactly. So, and we want to have like good standards which are deployed voluntarily, and everything we do is done in the open. It's fully transparent, and it's a bottom-up process. So the leadership, when Kevin said, like, you know, I'm part of like the Internet Architecture Board, it's really like more like a oversight organization rather than us. Like imagine if I decide to say something and say, I want to do this, nothing's going to happen. Like everything has to be done bottom-up with consensus building. And what we try to do is like look at like what are the future topics and like see if process is being followed, rather than like forcing down the process. And all the leadership is chosen by the community, and it's really very diverse. The community that picks the thing is also like done randomly between all the participants in the IETF. So it's pretty diverse. So that's pretty much like what I wanted to say. So thank you very much, and I will take questions if you have any.
Hi, Suresh. Very comprehensive presentation. I have a suggestion. Probably we can touch on Christian's presentation. He may provide some complementary points to what you just did, and then we can go and have an open conversation. For those who do have questions right now for Suresh, what I ask you to do is just take a note of them. You can feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A, or just keep them on you, and then we will open your mic and allow you to present that during the open dialogue. So looking forward to Christian's presentation.
Thank you, Kevin. And congratulations for the chapter. Thank you everyone for your interest. So instead of doing a presentation, I would like to guide you on how to participate or look for those things that might be of interest for you if you're trying to do your initial work on the IETF. So first, I would like to somehow explain the relationship between ISOC and the IETF. Most of you are aware of Internet Society. You are participating in the chapter already, and you heard oftentimes on ISOC activities doing outreach for the IETF. And the reason for that is that we've been created in 1992 somehow to support the IETF. We've been doing that for a long time now. And the role for ISOC with the IETF is to create the conditions for them to do their work. So we are somehow the secretariat or the home of the IETF, but we have no role on their processes. It's not for us to participate in those processes, but to create the conditions for them to do their work. And that has been the case since 1992, and efforts like this webinar from the chapter are an example of our advocacy and trying to get these outreach efforts, trying to get more participation from other regions, which is in the interest of the IETF, as Suresh mentioned. Also, I'd like to show you, can you see the YouTube webpage I'm sharing now? So,
yes, we're able to see, the webpage, yeah.
Suresh mentioned that the IETF meets 3 times a year. Most of the discussions and agreements and progress in the working groups take place on mailing lists, but the meetings themselves are very important. But the good news is that all of those meetings are on YouTube. So in case you would like to see what happened last week was the IETF 123 in Madrid, in Spain. And if you go to the IETF channel in YouTube, you see all the sessions, all the working group sessions, all the area sessions, everything that happened during that week, it is available online. So you can see how those discussions took place. You can see all the presentations that anyone there at the meeting could have seen. So,
Chris, sorry to interrupt you. As Tracy pointed out here, if you're showing a YouTube page, no, we're not seeing that. We're seeing just Internet Society's website.
No. Thanks for letting me know. So when I change my tab, I should stop sharing. I guess now you can see it.
Okay, yes, now we're seeing the YouTube.
Okay,
yeah.
So I'm going to stop sharing each time I change my tab. So this is what I was referring to. This is the IETF channel in YouTube, and there you can select the meeting, and when you select Madrid, which is where I am now, you will see all the sessions that took place during that week, and you will be able to see the entire session. So if you remember from Suresh's slides, one of the things that you will see in the when you check those sessions, and you will see in their work, is that everything is organized in working groups, and those working groups are organized or grouped in areas. So if you go to the IETF webpage, you will see a lot of information, and you will see that you can check the areas in case you would like to see on a specific topic that you would like to work on. And you can see all the working groups, which are currently more than 100, 130, and some keywords that will let you decide from where to start. And once you have chosen where you would like to start contributing or working, you can then, it's a pity I cannot do it, you cannot see this on my screen, but anyway, in the previous screen, you can select the data tracker, which is the tool that is used for your work on the IETF. And from there, you will be able to select the area that you would like to engage with, and within each area, all the working groups that belong to that area. And in case you know or you find something that is of interest, you can select the working group, and in the About tab, you will see the charter for the working group. So once you identified a topic that is of interest for you, find the working group that is working on that in the data tracker, and look for the charter of the working group. Will give you an idea on what is the purpose, the objective, and what's their current work. So you will also see there all the documents, the discussions. You can subscribe to the mailing list. You will see the address and how to subscribe. And you can also check the list archive from there. So everything, as Suresh mentioned, is very open, transparent, available online, and it should be very, very easy for you to identify topics of interest and also engage in those conversations. And in case you really find something where you can contribute and you need help on your initial steps, let us know. So let the chapter know, Kevin and the people there in Trinidad Tobago, and also that they can contact us and we can help you on those initial steps. And with that, let's open for questions, Kevin.
Okay, so thanks very much, Chris. Thanks very much, Suresh. Lots of topics there, very interesting topics. I see we have some questions coming through via the chat. Probably Richard and Jackie could tell me whether we want to enable everyone's mics, or what do you think would be the best way right now?
I'll answer when I have a question.
Okay. So, Richard, go ahead. Okay. Well, there's this question coming in through from Tracy. How does the IETF work with other standards bodies? For example, the ITUT, ISO, IEEE, etc. So, what's the cross-fertilization there?
Yeah. So,
I'm glad Suresh is with us. It's the perfect contact for that question.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Krishnan. So Tracy, what we do is we have this concept called liaison between IETF and other organizations. I think in most of the cases, the interaction happens by people participating in both the bodies. So imagine somebody would participate in both IEEE and IETF. They bring the work together. So I'll give you an example. There's this person called Juan Carlos Zuniga. He works closely with IEEE, and he works with IETF too. So he attends the IETF meetings and brings in the IEEE point of view, goes to the IEEE meetings, brings the IETF point of view, right? That's one low-level thing, which is what we call an informal relationship between people. But there are some organizations that you have in there, like ITUT, right? And ISO, that are way more formal organizations, right? And they do require a liaison relationship. So we do have official relationship to some groups in there. So when you talk about ITUT, I can think of study group 15 or 17 or 12, and study group 5, so which have a direct relationship with the IETF because we have common work. And we also have somebody who's in charge of the relationship towards the ITUT itself. So I'll put in a link to a web page where you can actually look at all the current liaison managers for the liaisons we have. So we use that to kind of have discussions with them, right? We can just say, hey, this is work we are starting. Are you interested? Or they say, hey, this is work we are starting. Is that interesting? Or can you tell us the status about this work happening in IETF? And for a formal organizations, we are able to formally respond using liaison statements to them. So there's also a page where you can actually see every liaison statement we sent and received, right? And so that's one of the, there's Krishnan posted one of the documents. There's also another one, which is 4052 bis, which kind of describes the liaison relationships as well. So if you just do 4052, Krishnan, you'll find the other document. So these two describe how we actually relate. The 4052 describes how we relate, and 4053 describes how we send and receive communications to them.
right, great. Tracy, I see your hand is up. You want to take the mic?
Yeah, so I would say that Richard had said he had a question just before.
Oh, apologies.
I did?
Yes.
But I have a follow-up to this, if you don't mind. If I could
Okay,
just-
sure. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Tracy.
No
Right,
question, yeah.
So on the issue with relationship with other bus standards bodies, I have another question. You said earlier that it's sort of like a voluntary method or voluntary way that I guess equipment manufacturers or software providers, pick up your standards, right? But for something like RCS, picked as a peculiar example. So RCS, as you would be aware, is a source of, let's say, a ecosystem war between Google and Apple on messaging, as
Yep.
as an example.
Mhm.
Is there, so without getting into all the nitty-gritty, is there a role for like a standards body like the IETF to sort of play a facilitator or something to ensure that we don't have this proliferation of wall gardens and so that people could play nice with each other, and because I keep saying things like email is the one application on the internet that seems to still play nice with everything. It works with anything, pretty much any client, or works with cloud systems, but everything else, messaging is one of those things that has just gone crazy, and it's just all over the place. Is there a role for the IETF to say, hey guys, come on, you have all the kind? I've been to a few IETF meetings and everybody's there, all the people are sitting in the room. Can we just get along and let's agree that RCS, using as an example, RCS is the standard, and therefore green and blue bubbles and all that nonsense, let's get away from that and let's proceed to make messaging like email and et cetera, et cetera. Is there a role for IETF in this, and that kind of not matchmaking, but pacifying, smoothing the egos of the and the commercial interests of these big players? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I have a good answer, but not an extremely good answer. Okay, so I'm going to go with sometimes there's market forces. So as I said before, right, we are voluntary standards, and IETF is really good at making tools. So what we do is we build the building blocks for the internet. So if you look at FaceTime or RCS, right, they all use IETF protocols underneath. Right. So for us, it's not really how it's put together, but the protocols underneath it still uses HTTP. It still uses TLS, right? It still uses IPv6 or IPv4, as depends on the case. It still uses SIP that IETF invented for all the video calls and audio calls. So at the end, it's still our protocols. But I think the other piece that you talk about is how do we get out of walled gardens? And I think I would say the whole internet is kind of trending that way to more centralized things, right? It's not really at the protocol level, but it's something that's sitting on top of the protocol level. But we do have some strong successes going the other way. So the IETF has come up with stuff. So there is this thing, about yeah tags that Apple has, right? For tracking things that you lose or stuff like that, and Google has its own incompatible set of things, which Samsung tags, the Air things and stuff and so on that does it. So the IETF came together, we got both the Google and Apple people to come together and work in the IETF for stuff that actually can cross-relate. So you can use a notification from a Google-based tag towards Apple and Apple-based tag towards Google, right? But it's kind of happens more on a case-by-case basis where we see a strong need. And in this case, the strong need was that we wanted to protect people from domestic abuse. So there's people who are partners or people who are throwing in these tags. And once you had an Apple phone and an Apple tag, you would get a notification saying, hey, somebody's tag is following you. But if it was a Google tag, you wouldn't get it, right? So we had to work for some common goal, right, which kind of proves that having a cross interoperability is more important than having their walled garden. And that's kind of how we convince people to do the stuff. And there's also for messaging, there's this thing called Mimi that IETF is working on, which is for trying to open up the the messaging between multiple messengers. Like, hopefully in the future, all the the Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, all those things will be able to interoperate. So I'll put a pointer to Mimi on there, but the part that's like outside the IETF's control is like we are not the governments. Okay, so the government somehow had to buy into this, and in the Mimi case, you would see the European Union has like a strong buy-in into that to kind of open the things up, right? So our job is to make sure there's technology that enables all these kind of walled gardens to interoperate, but like we don't have the power to make people to come to the table, right? And that's pretty much the situation right now, and I don't expect that to change very much, but we do have really, really good discussions with policymakers. Like Chris can talk to it. We had like a bunch of policymakers. We had people from the Caribbean, like who are there as well, right? Like, the last 2 meetings, and we talk to them and tell them how it's important to kind of open up the internet and make it like decentralized, like for their email. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, because you gave a good example of a success story. So as you said, it's possible, but obviously it only works when there's a willingness to make it work, right? So I guess the underlying issue is that maybe there's another, besides the willingness side of it, is there another? I'm trying to find the way to phrase this. I mean, because you're voluntary, you can't force things on people, right? Obviously. But certainly we can't continue with this proliferation of things as, one entity decides, hey, here's my this and here's my that, and let's do this, and, VHS beta, let's see who wins kind of thing. It's a very costly and not very useful for the wider community. I mean, it might be very useful for the market, the market forces. So again, the challenge I'm trying to raise is whether the IETF can sort of, raise themselves to that sort of challenge, because you have the people there in the room, and I don't know if there's a working group that does this in particular. It sounds as if the liaison thing that you mentioned, right? So let's say it's a W3C using.
Did I lose your audio? I lost your audio.
Tracy?
Right.
Okay. Tracy, are you back?
Did I lose you?
We're hearing you.
Did I lose you? Yeah, okay.
We're hearing you now. Yeah.
Are you hearing me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
No?
So
Okay.
to answer you, Tracy, right, there is a research group that we have that's looking at decentralization. So I posted a link to that too in there. So you can take a look at look at these high level things that we are looking at, right? But so you can go to the mailing list, and you can go to the meetings that Krishnan talked about, right? Like where you can actually go and look at the stuff. But it is certainly, for a lot of us, this is a big concern. The centralization of power into like few walled gardens is like a concern, and we are trying to build protocols that make it possible to build other models. Right, like for example, like there's this thing called Blue Sky. I don't know if you heard about it. Like Blue Sky is like a short messaging social network kind of thing, and we're trying to get the Blue Sky people to come to the IETF and standardize the protocol there, right? Like so it becomes like a standard. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thanks. This is very promising. So I would love to attend one of these working groups if possible. So I will try and get myself in this. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy.
All right, Battle of the Standards. Before we forget, Richard, over to you.
Hi. I don't have anything to say. Sorry.
You forgot your question. It took us a
No,
while.
no. I didn't have any questions. I was just answering when Kevin was asking whether or not we should keep the mics open. I'm just a confirmed listener today.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks a lot.
Kevin,
I just
in
wanted
that
to
case, I may have a question.
I have one to follow up something that was just said, and then we could probably
Okay.
get to you. Yeah. I wanted to piggyback on the comment on the Caribbean participation recently. And I don't know, Chris, you probably are quite familiar with the region. And just could you give us a overview as to how involved are we as a region at IETF, if that's a growing trend, what you foresee for more meaningful participation for the Caribbean. Just a few thoughts on that.
Well, as Suresh mentioned, there are regions that are less represented, and the Caribbean is a good example. There have been participants in the Caribbean. We had a program in the past where we supported people from or students or engineers willing to participate in the IETF. That program didn't have the impact that we expected because participants at that time did not get engaged with the IETF as much as we were expecting. We had several participants from the Caribbean in that program. We also have this policymakers program when we invite governments to the meetings, and we try to, the objective for them is to know more about the way that the IETF works compared to the ITU meetings where they of them participate. And on that, we had several participants. We worked with CTU on that, and Niger participated, and others that he contacted us with. So I would say that governments are probably aware because we invited many governments for the Caribbean. We also invited individuals which took part in a few meetings but did not follow up. But there are people from the Caribbean that moved to the US, and some of them are active. So we have met people from Jamaica, even from Trinidad Tobago, that now are working in the US and are, at least I saw them on mailing lists, so they are somehow active. And same with Latin America. There are a few exceptions in Latin America. There are some countries like Brazil or Argentina or Chile that do have some well-known IETFers, well-known engineers working there. But again, those are like isolated efforts from a few organizations like NICBR or LACNIC or individuals that do consultant jobs or things like that. But it's not like in the Northern Hemisphere where the companies themselves are supporting their engineers, even when many of those companies do have operations in our region. So there's more work to do on activities like this one. So once our expectation is that once the students, for example, at the university start engaging in these discussions and look or find these efforts of value for their current research or current work, then because of that, they might get contacts and support within the IETF. We can further increase their participation. So again, there's a lot of work to do for us to find the value for our students and engineers on spending this time and effort on the IETF.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Jackie, go on.
No, I just wanted to, you asked what I was going to ask, so I'm going to run a quick follow-up, which is thinking about barriers to participation. In the Caribbean islands, we have, 6 official languages. Is language a barrier? Is it necessary to speak English if you're, for example, one of our Haitian friends or, Surinamese friends? Is that what, do you need to know English to get in there?
I would say yes. Unfortunately, like, this is so we don't have any kind of real-time translation stuff in the UN meetings. It's just simply something we cannot afford at this point. But if you go look at the YouTube videos, like, it's easier to get the knowledge, so you can have subtitles in other language that the videos can be generated. But to participate, unfortunately, English is the only way to do it, right? Because that's the language that most people in the world understand. So in that piece, it's kind of not there yet. Hopefully with real-time machine translation, that barrier will go away, that somebody can use whatever language and translate it. But we are not there yet. So it's not like a UN meeting where you can wear and choose channel number 4 and there's a human translating. That doesn't happen right now.
Okay, Krishnan, how does that work with Latin America?
Well,
participation.
In Latin America, that's probably the biggest barrier. Fortunately, it's not that problematic in the Caribbean, but yes, for most of the countries in South America and Central America, this is the main barrier. But as Suresh mentioned, we think that that's going to change in the near future. So with all those new tools, I think that the language barrier it's not going to be problematic with this and many other technological things where we are trying to promote participation.
Okay, and with regard to your gender, have you identified any barriers that are obvious that will help bring more non-male persons into the IETF?
So there's a few things we started changing. So there was this person actually who's South American, right, Carolina, who kind of went through this thing, and there's actually a report. So talking about the culture, what kind of culture that kind of prevents women from attending. So there's 2 issues there, right? One of them is a small set of people who might be interested, right? That's already something, but the issue is how many of them actually participate. So even if you look at STEM, even if the numbers are low, the IETF numbers are even lower, right? If you can notice it. So part of it is there's the kind of tone of dialogue that people have between each other. Things are very, very direct in the IETF, and that some of the female participants found that kind of off-putting. And so we as in leadership, we've been trying to kind of encourage more dialogue in a way that doesn't put off newcomers. So it's not just women. A lot of newcomers kind of get very frightened by how people do it, even though it's just very direct engineer conversations, right? You just say, oh, I could go to Krishnan, that's a really bad idea, you should do it. And Krishnan say, okay, no, but your idea, blah, blah, blah. And then for us, I know Krishnan pretty well for I don't know, 15 years, Krishnan, right? And it's fine, but for the newer people, it's kind of off-putting. So there is a report, I'll try to find a link to it and I post it. And we kind of there's a bunch of recommendations in there. One example was there's this kind of bar boffs that people go to and talk about ideas after drinking a lot of alcohol, and women didn't feel comfortable going to those things, which is pretty obvious after somebody tells you that, right? But that was not something that I don't drink either, and I don't go to those things either, right? But there's so women didn't feel very comfortable participating in those conversations. So there's a lot of systematic things that women didn't feel comfortable doing it, and we're kind of going through the list of these things and then trying to improve on those things, right? We're trying to actually change the culture of the organization to make it more inviting for women and minorities and first-time participants.
Great, thank you.
Okay. A question occurred to me, and I'm sure this is not at all what you'll be expecting, right? There are many areas within global internet governance that's currently under review. Are there any weaknesses or threats to rough consensus running code? Or is this should I call it the safe mechanism, despite everything? Because we would like to think, as from an engineering perspective, you just come together and you solve a problem. But are there any threats at all that you see on the horizon?
100%. There's always a threat. So we see the openness as a strength, but the openness is also a threat, which means that anybody with like a small number of people who are very determined can like delay things for a long time, right? So so part of the thing is like, anytime somebody brings up an issue, whether they do it in good faith or not, we have to give it a fair like take on it, right? We need to actually go through it. So like the rough consensus is prone to have delays, because like our goal is to make sure that everybody's like heard. Not everybody's concerns are like fixed, right? But at least the concerns are heard, and then we realize like, sometimes people can be in the rough part of the rough consensus, right? Which is possible, but it does make sure that like, it takes more time than if you just had voting, right? So the openness is like our greatest strength, but it's also a little bit of a weakness, because like anybody can come in and delay the process quite a bit.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Colleagues online, colleagues here, Nicole, any other questions that you may have? So I'm just checking one last time. And if that's the case, going once, going twice.
Quick question, Kevin. Are there
Sure.
any questions on the live stream? Because we're also streaming on Facebook, and
Right. So
Richard was checking.
Right. Richard, you have an update there?
Yes, now take a look. I don't think so. Hold on.
I checked a while back, but I hadn't seen anything.
So Kevin, just for Jacqueline, if you look at the report, like I posted the link onto the site, you take a look at it. I think that's like very interesting reading for anybody. It was very interesting reading for me, because like sometimes you don't realize, like, after like a long time, what are the barriers you face. And I think it's really good to look at like how this don't apply just to women. I can assure you it's not just for women. Like, even though it's kind of written the women's point of view, it applies to a lot of newcomers, people coming from non-Western countries. Like, there's a lot of angles in which this is relevant. It's like, it's really about finding a community, finding like mentorship, getting training. I think that's like a high level view of things to get any kind of new community that we want into the IETF. So yeah, take a look at it. I think it's very interesting.
Okay, let's
Do
see.
you have like an onboarding program for newcomers? Introduce.
There is.
Get a mentor, that sort of thing, yeah?
There is, yeah. So like we always had one, but it used to be a shorter one, but now we have a really long one. It's like, it takes a whole of Sunday. It used to be like an hour on Sunday when newcomers will be on board, and now we have a whole of Sunday talking about different aspects of it. It's kind of like in result to like, looking at this and saying like, hey, how can we do this better? So for sure, yeah. So if you come to IETF Sunday, you don't have to come. You can even look at the videos of the Sunday before the IETF starts. This is really the like goal of that newcomer program, is to get the onboarding. Yeah.
Because I do remember going into when I first started way back, my first ICANN meeting was rather confusing and rather scary. And there's always a moment when you want to say something and go, ooh, is everybody in this room going to think I'm stupid if I ask this? Does everybody know this already?
Yeah.
And having a mentor and having people to walk you through this, and you run your question by them and they say, no, go ahead, ask it. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Is always very helpful.
Yeah, fully agree.
And Suresh, is that mentorship extended to actually participating in the RFC, or is it that the RFC you're on an open list and you're just subject to whatever feedback you get there?
Absolutely. Like there is like people who always talk to me offline about the new ideas, and I'm totally willing to give, but it's really a question, like everybody's a volunteer. We need to remember that, right? So the issue is getting how much cycles do I have for somebody new, right? Like, so let's say like,
so not formal shepherds, but informal shepherds, if you like. Okay.
Correct. Right. Like, so imagine if Jacqueline starts participating, I can probably like, help her for a meeting or two to kind of get on board. But then at that point, like, then there's more people coming in who are newer, right? Like, so I think like the number we are thinking of is like 5. Like 5 is when after 5 meetings is when we stop treating people as new attendees anymore. So they don't have access to any of this. So that's kind of the ramp you have to kind of get accustomed to the process and stuff and so on. But always like informal mentorships, there's like people who've been to like 40 meetings who still come and ask me things, and like, I work with them on it, right? And there is people who've never been to an IETF meeting in person who have RFCs written. Actually, there's like quite a few of them. If you look at it, like especially with the remote participation now, there's a lot of people who are RFC authors without ever being to a meeting. So this is like come quite a good way in there. We can always do better. Like that's something I would say, but we've come a long way over the last 10 years or so.
All right. Well, thanks for that, because I think that really points to the points you're making earlier about finding community and developing community. And I think that's really reassuring. Besides the actual subject matters, as Jackie has said, not wanting to sound stupid, being able to find avenues to put what you think are relevant contributions to the discussions, that's very important to see. And I also like the fact that you mentioned that you're exposing governments and other decision makers to this area of work, letting them see what the implications are for what they are trying to achieve, and eventually give, as with anyone, an equal opportunity to contribute to IETF's work. All right. Richard, did you detect anything, any comments? Richard? Okay. I don't know if I've probably lost Richard.
Richard's
He's around?
probably, he's around. I'm just...
Okay. But nonetheless, I would say we did not do too bad for time. So we started 10 minutes later. We are now at 5 past the hour. So we were sort of recouped a bit what we missed out at the start. Richard?
Hello.
Okay. Yes, Richard, any comments you detected on the live stream?
No, I haven't seen anything. No.
Okay. All right. And with that,
Niran has some input. I don't know, Niran, do you want to turn on your mic and say it, or do you just want me to read it out? Okay. So Niran says, given that it is a volunteer input, the Caribbean has a few challenges around time and finance management that can deter some newcomers. What would you say to someone looking at IETF as a valuable use of their time, as a benefit? And also, is there a challenge of sponsorship from corporate interests? How can we illustrate added value to someone who's pondering, should I get involved in this? So, as I said before, right, like the financial cost is really about the time that you want to spend on it, right? Like, so you can, as long as you participate in the meeting remotely, you can get a fee waiver for the meeting fees, but the time investment is real. So the time you have to spend to read the background stuff, right? Like, because when you want to participate, you need to spend quite a bit of time reading the background stuff. So that is really coming from you. And a lot of the time, the companies start seeing the value only after you have something. So for me, the company sponsors me because I have already accomplished something and I can actually show how that's useful for the company. So there's probably the initial stuff that you have to do is probably going to have to come off your own time. Like, and that might be difficult for a lot of people, right? Like, either like your day job takes a lot of time. You could be like, having like young kids, like, there's like a whole bunch of, or you could be taking care of an elder parent, like there's a whole bunch of situations that could make it difficult. But also the ISOC has like kind of gotten people and sponsored them to do this stuff, right? But there is no like fixed corporate program. There is stuff like that is focused. So like there's stuff for the regulator, for example, there's stuff for students. So the IETF does sponsor some kind of diversity grants for students.
to make sure that, like, imagine if you're a student in some university in Trinidad and Tobago, like, you have some interesting internet research, they sponsor them to kind of come and do the stuff, right? But we don't have a generic program. So there's like targeted programs towards like specific kind of people we want to bring in. But otherwise, in general, it's like, as long as you're willing to put in the time, the cost is not a barrier, but like the time is certainly something you need to put in to understand like all the stuff that has been done before in your area of interest.
Yeah, so it's basically you can put in as much or as little time as you have and contribute as much or as little as you can.
100%. There's people who just take notes in meetings, right? That's like a lot of the people, like when I go to a meeting, I started off by like taking notes in meetings, and then I understood like what people are talking about. I get to talk to people, then I start writing, reviewing drafts that go to working group last call. So there's like a kind of a progression you can work through to get to like writing RFCs. Like it's always like start from the bottom and like keep going there, right? And that's certainly something that's possible. Like I'm proof of that I started with like, just like young nobody. So
even in the scheme of volunteering, what does recognition look like when you have contributed significantly to IETF over the years?
So so we don't have this kind of plaques kind of thing that a lot of people do, right? Like, so there's nothing like that. So pretty much like, what you get is like either you get a name on an RFC as like an author or as a contributor, or you get like, if you're doing like something smaller, you get like acknowledgements in the RFC saying, hey, like such and such, like, Kevin, like, reviewed this for like, with the Caribbean mindset and like gave me feedback to improve. That kind of stuff is like something that's like in the text of the RFC, and it's for life, right? Because RFCs are immutable for life. So that's one thing. And the other thing is like, you can get like leadership positions in the IETF. So you can go from like you can do like manage, you can become like a secretary, like a working group chair, and then you can go through the leadership positions like area director and board is like all based on contributions that you've done.
All right. I think I'll summarize that as moral rights and professional prestige, which definitely should be something we all be looking forward to when we participate at IETF.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, we're at time. We have done 60 minutes. And what I like to do is I'd like to probably adjourn our session for now. But before we do that, I'd like to thank both of you for accompanying the chapter in this wonderful discussion on the IETF and how Trinbagonian and Caribbean students can become more involved. I think each of the points here have been very useful and something that for us to take on board, especially among our university students when they're trying to figure out, well, what's the next step? How do I make some sort of impact on how the internet is built? And in addition to which, I also like to thank everyone for connecting here. This webinar will be nothing without people who have connected, who would have sent their AI note takers. And as we mentioned at the start, what we'll be doing is post-production, making sure that this webinar circulates among the right groups. And I'm sure that Suresh and Krishnan, will have in our post-production as well contact information for them, should you want to reach out and find out anything more beyond what we would have discussed there. So without further ado, thanks very much. Thank you to the viewing audience, and until the next webinar. Have a great evening, everybody.
Right, one quick thing. Yes, the recording will be shared. Is there someone asking about that who arrived a bit late? Yes, it will be shared. Not probably next week, Kevin?
Yeah, next week.
Yeah, it won't be it's not today for tomorrow, but it will be shared probably sometime next week.
Yeah.
And we have all your emails when you registered, so we can send out links to you.
All right. And in TNT and across the region, we're coming up to a very exciting weekend. We have a long weekend with the celebration of Emancipation Day. So early greetings and salutations to everyone. Happy Emancipation Day.